welcome, folks, to Dark Hour Paranormal. I am your host, Michael Roser, and tonight, folks, we are deviating a little bit from the world of the paranormal, but not too much. Keeping in mind that there's a good possibility that many of these aspects of esoterica that we cover are connected in one shape or form. I think that my guest this evening will encompass some of that and bring us down an avenue of interpretation and inquisition when it comes to some of our questions at large, and at least exploring these. If we can't get to a solid answer together, we will certainly have something to think about walking away. Folks, tonight I am very honored to introduce to you Todd Wilcox. He is going to be with us this evening, as I'm mentioning here. Todd is another expansive individual within this field. He has a wonderful book out called The Slipstream Shaman, using quantum healing for individuals, communities, the planet, and beyond. I certainly implore you to go and check out that body of work. But, to talk about some of the folks we have here on the show, some of them have a certain facet of themselves, not to use the same word again, a certain angle that they are very versed in. And they can come to the table and they can speak at length about that one particular point in the field. And then there are others who have traversed, maybe of their own accord, perhaps experientially. This has found them a lot more than just one particular notion that we look at when we talk about the world of the paranormal, ufology, cryptozoology, healing, you name it, it runs across the board, folks. And Todd sits right here on this side of the fence, wherein he is very versed and encompasses a lot of what we all speak on every single day. So again, I'm very honored, and it's going to be an absolute pleasure to have Todd with us on the show tonight. We're going to be talking about something that I have brushed up against with quite a few times. Never really on purpose, I guess you could say. These things sort of found me as I would continue on within my growth, especially as a youngster, my teenage years going into my 20s, even my early 30s. I learned a little bit about the shamanic interpretation and perception that many do practice. Now, with that being said, again, I don't know a whole lot, and I think Todd will be able to enlighten us to some degree and anchor in this particular ancient concept because, let's face it, there are many indigenous cultures that have coined a man of knowledge or some sort of sorcerer. You have a medicine man, medicine woman. They were all acknowledged in a very similar fashion, but they all sat under the umbrella of shamanism. Now, what does that mean for us today? What does this ancient word really mean for us in respect to the progression of the field and the research that we do? Once again, Todd is here to talk a little bit about that in depth. And of course, I'll be asking the questions that I always do. First of all, it's nice to see everyone here in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us. I know we are going over GoofOn right now. Unfortunately, as I've mentioned before, we're working with what the guest can give us, and that is okay with me and hopefully okay with you. If you don't catch it here live, you can certainly catch it in the archives. With that being said, let me read a quick bio on Todd, which again is shy of what he's capable of in respect to this conversation that we're going to have. But again, I introduce these folks to you. Please go into their bodies of work, check out what they've done. Most of these folks that come on the show have such a significance in respect to the progression, once again, in the field that we all work with. They're not going anywhere. These are the new voices, the new era, and some of them have been doing for quite some time. Now, Todd has a lifelong fascination with alternative healing, consciousness expansion, and human potential. His first book, Slipstream Shaman, using quantum healing for individuals, communities, the planet, and beyond, was recently published, and the next 2 books in the series will be out soon. Todd also loves talking about the paranormal and hosts a radio program called My Side of the Universe. Yes, we have what you consider a radio affiliate here with us tonight. I love that. I started radio back in 2002, as most of you know, and I still say I miss it. This is a nice platform too, but I miss the old days of radio. But Todd is here with his personality, knowledge, and research to discuss, again, some of these topics that I have mentioned at length, and that's exactly what we're going to do tonight. So, without further ado, as we say here on YouTube, I'd like to introduce to you Todd Wilcox. Todd, how are you tonight? Thanks for joining us here on Dark Hour Paranormal, mate.
I'm doing great, Michael. It's great to be here. And holy moly, do I have some big shoes to fill after that intro. I am I better go eat some Wheaties or something, so I'm ready for this.
You remember the commercials with Michael Jordan, shooting the baskets and everything. I've got
Absolutely.
a funny
Yeah.
story I can tell you at another point with that, sort of in the sense of laws of attraction, even at the age that I was. Yes, good reference. Some Wheaties with some oatmeal on the side. We'll need that consistency to keep us going. But no,
There we
listen,
go.
everything that I'm, prattling on about here, I do believe, you encompass all of that, and certainly one of the reasons that you find yourself here today with us, and you have a lot to share with the world. And today, that is not necessarily something rare, but it's about the quality of what people have to share. And I think you certainly fit into that latter category. Now, before we go into the world of shamanism, let me touch upon something that many of us grew up with, perhaps yourself included, in respect to this particular area. And that is that character that we all either know, love, or hate, Carlos Castaneda. And again, this is for many people sort of the jump off point where they were introduced to something natural in respect to integration with nature, and that people have been doing this for a long time. How much stock do you put into Carlos Castaneda's interpretation of a shaman or a man of knowledge?
So I'm a little embarrassed. I'm not going to be able to talk too much about Carlos. Wasn't one of my studies. I'm terribly sorry to start that way, but yeah, he wasn't one of my guys.
Nope, that's perfectly okay. I just had an assumption here because he's always sort of been a prominent name in people's mouth, but as time has gone on, with his writings on Don Juan, when you look at it in the book, it appears to be a singularity, right? There's just one person, but as we've gone forward, we realized that maybe it was a conglomeration of other different people that he had crossed and created some sort of fantasy within this. But I thought some of the concepts they brought up were pretty interesting, perhaps something to look into later on. But then again, maybe not, because again, there's a lot of controversy around that individual. All right, well, let's take another.
So sorry.
No, it's quite all right. Believe me, that's quite all right. I shouldn't have made any sort of assumption here, and lesson learned. You know what I mean?
You set me up for some great swings and hits tonight, and I fell right on my face on the first swing. So we have nowhere to go but up at this point.
Nope, that's exactly right, man. I mean, but we did lay out the mats prior to the show. I knew, it was a possibility somewhere. I mean, it could have been me. But that being said, listen, why don't we take it back to the beginning? We'll do something different tonight. Take it back to the beginning for yourself. Many people have certain experiences growing up, or, they have a family member or a close friend that introduces them into the world of esoterics. I'll put it that way. For you, what kind of forged this path that brought you to where you are today? And at what point did you decide that you wanted to be more public and boisterous about some of the knowledge you have and the teachings, rather than keeping it for yourself and perhaps, people within your immediate circle?
Great question. So, as far as getting the interest in this type of work, as weird as it may sound, it's from watching old TV shows as a kid, Gilligan's Island and weird things like that, where there's a medicine man you referenced, and those things. And voodoo, hearing about voodoo, and wondering why they thought that there was demons and monsters, affecting these people. And, and it wasn't until years and years later, when I started doing this energy work, that I started seeing the representation of things that were wrong with people that many times looked like a demon or an alien or a monster of some kind. Every once in a while it actually was, but for the most part it was just a representation of what was going on with them. And I call them companions, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But as far as where I got to today, about 15 years ago, I was in a paranormal investigation group that we wanted to bring some people together to help the worst cases. If somebody had some kind of a haunting or possession that no other group could help, we wanted to go in and help. And we weren't really sure what to do, and so we started talking to different people, and we were introduced to a shaman that was going to teach us how to use energy to protect ourselves and other people and help people. And as I'm training with this shaman, it was not a great experience. She was trying to force her beliefs on me, as far as what she was seeing when she did this. Her energy looked completely different than mine, and felt different than mine. But she was saying it should look like this. If it doesn't look like this, you're wrong. You've got to keep doing it till it looks like this. And everybody in the group had different energy, but she was trying to force you to feel and see her energy as yours,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just not the case. My energy at the time was a light blue, and very cool to the touch. She was describing something else and even warm, and I talked to other people and they were seeing other things, but they were trying to force the light blue. After we left that training, I continued to practice and just went with my energy. And eventually that energy I would create it, I call it an energy ball. You get it, and I'm going crooked here, but you squeeze your hands together and you start
Yep.
feeling this energy and the
Mm-hmm.
color. And some people are going to have warm energy that they feel in their palms. Some are going to have cold. Mine's always been cool. It evolved from that light blue color to something that looks like if you shine a very bright light through a diamond is what the energy looks like now. um, and it could look like something else in the future. And whatever it is, I'm going to go with it. Things evolve, things change, so I'm going to go with it. Once I did that energy and I was able to put it over me for protection in these different paranormal events that we were at, I started to be able to meditate. And for years, meditation for me was sitting in a chair, breathing, trying to clear my mind, and then falling asleep.
Yep.
That was meditation for me. And what I found was, as I was using my energy and paying attention to the energy, that this room opened up for me. And I call it my quantum room. And it's a room with just gray mist swirling around in it. And as I'm teaching people this process, everybody's room is different. Just like everybody's energy is different, the room that they manifest, that they create for themselves to do this work in, is different. A great friend of mine goes down some steps to a pond, and that's where hers is. There's people that their room is in the woods. There's one guy that his favorite car is his room. And everybody has something different. One person is a spaceship. So, whatever your room ends up being is okay. And don't try to force something that looks like mine. Mine's just gray mist. It's nothing spectacular. It's nothing pretty. It's kind of boring, but great things happen there. And what I found was, when I was in that room, I could actually concentrate and do the meditation work that I wanted to do. Different mentors came to me, spirit animals, spirit guides came to me in that room. And what started as trying to do things to help people in a paranormal setting became something where I could help people with their health, with their thoughts, with their sleep, with their overall well-being. And while I was doing that, I continued to look for my purpose. And what came to me was that my purpose was to help. And I was expecting some big miraculous thing, and that everything would change for me when I knew what my purpose was, and it did. But it's not easy work when you know your purpose. Just because you know it doesn't make things easy. It
It's just
puts
the
you on
beginning.
right course. Yeah, you're on the right course, but there's still a lot of work. And so, knowing that my purpose was to help, every time I was in the quantum room, I was thinking, well, how can I help? And it evolved from helping one person at a time or one animal at a time to how can I help communities? How can I help the bigger picture? How can I teach people to do this so that we can do more and more work and make things better? As corny as it sounds, I would love to have us live in a society that is about inclusion and working together and that common good, so that we can start focusing on things that are going to get us to a better place. Whether that is developing all of our minds and consciousness to where we can do more that way, or developing space travel, or being able to go under the ocean or through the earth, or whatever the case may be. What's our next step? How do we evolve? How do we get better? I worry that we are devolving. And what this is all about, helping people on a bigger scale, individually, and also on a bigger scale to get us to a better place.
Now, I mean, that everything you said is somewhat lofty, depending on who you ask. I mean, we seem to be quite rooted in this dualistic reality. I mean, it seems to be tough to kind of break out of that whole side of samsara. It's intrinsic to our nature to be a part of that duality, and yet we're, sort of evolving to the point where we need to stand outside of ourselves and observe this in a different fashion, understanding that we are included within the process, but we may not identify with certain aspects as we move forward. Again, I think this comes back to, understanding consciousness and, where we're going as not just a species, but the planet itself. And, we can talk at length about that. We've mentioned many things on the show in regards to the planetary vibration raising and so forth. Sticking with the shamanic idea for a moment here, what to you is the most perilous aspect about shamanic work? I mean, if we as a collective at one point in our history considered the majority of entities and elementals allies, whether we perceive them to be detrimental or benevolent, where did our relationship turn a different face? Where in now we find it necessary to protect ourselves from what we once worked with side by side?
Yeah, and where that all happened, I won't really be able to pinpoint, but you definitely see it. I wonder if Hollywood and books had a factor in that. What sells better, boring or a monster? So going to extremes like we do in Hollywood and TV and books may have been where we started to go away. The concrete jungles that we live in are definitely a part of it. We've lost touch with things. That's another beautiful part about this process. It doesn't matter if you live in the country and you can go sit down on the dirt and do this. You can do this work in a high rise in New York or on a jet flying over the ocean. It doesn't matter where you are. You get into a connection with things, with people, with animals, with the planet when you're in this, what I call quantum state. And I'm probably not using the words correctly as a physicist would. Mm-hmm. I might not be using these words correctly as a shaman from the Amazon would, but they work for me and they work for how I'm, for what I'm doing. And so this is really about getting that connection back. Not we don't have to fight whether it's science or religion or something completely different. It just is. And as I started doing this work, I was always wondering, well, did I really help this person? Did I really help this animal? Did I really help this community? Mm-hmm. But you get coincidences. Coincidences start stacking up. And eventually you have to believe, yeah, I had to have been part of the process that got us there. Now, maybe I was just the tipping point. I was that straw that broke the camel's back so that the person could heal. I don't know exactly the entire mechanism of this. I just know that working with the people that have been sick and that or an animal that's been sick, they're getting great care from a doctor for the physical side of it, and they're getting medicine, the chemicals that should help, but for whatever reason they're not. The work I do goes in on the not the emotional but the energy level, mm-hmm. to help unblock things, to help set a stage to heal and to move forward. And so I don't want to act like I'm a doctor and that you shouldn't go to the doctor. I think you should, but the work I do and the work that the people that are working on this and developing their own method from what I teach definitely aids in the healing and recovery of people and communities and even bigger.
Well, let me make a distinction here too, because a lot of times people have this conception that, once you find that you have cancer, or once you break your leg, you're going to go to a metaphysical healer, or you're going to go to somebody versed in energy work. And, it's going to be something instantaneous. It's definitely taken for granted that this will happen, in way of healing or whatever the case may be. And when it doesn't, there's a lot of disappointment. The distinction I'd like to make here is elementary, but I think it's important to look at. And that is, and correct me if I'm wrong, some of the work that perhaps you do and others who are traversing the same end of this field as you are as well, it's sort of a preventative medicine in the sense that, we understand most sickness, illness comes from within first. So maybe there's something emotionally that's going on with you. Maybe there's something within your auric field that you're not aware of. Maybe you're holding on to some deep-seated trauma that is just eating away at you, but you've covered it up with so many layers that you don't even feel it the way that you do, but it's still there acting as a small burning coal that is, dismembering things around it within you internally, until eventually we see this come out into physicality. Now, at this point, it's about treating the ailment rather than going back to the source. So what you do in your work, again, if I'm wrong, correct me, is to kind of hit that note first, go within, see what we're healing before it becomes something manifest. Is that correct?
Absolutely right. And even after it manifests and cause the problem, help it change and grow. And so there's these things that I call companions. Mm-hmm. What they do, it's many times it starts as, and I believe all of them, just about all of them, started as something positive, something that was going to help us. So picture a small child getting screamed at by an adult. They get quiet, they go internal, it makes the screaming stop. So that behavior worked great for a 3-year-old. But going internal, going quiet, ignoring the rest of the world doesn't help you in school. And so now this child's having a hard time in school, later, maybe in college or at work or whatever. And there's this part of them that's holding them back. There's this thing inside of them holding them back. And many of those things, they started out with a positive intent, but to help a 3-year-old will not help a 50-year-old or a 20-year-old. And so we look for those things and remove them, and then give them the way to be what they should be, to go out and be positive again. Instead of causing all this pain inside somebody, now we release them. They get to go out and do what they were made to do, and that's help somebody with something again. And so it's releasing the energy from that person to go and be better, and it's also releasing things so that person can heal. So it's a double effect, not just for the person, but also the thing causing it.
Absolutely. And I think that it's important to understand too, well, at least this is more of a theory, I guess I should propose it this way. If you're in a situation or a state that, you simply need help to move forward, whether that be physically, emotionally, spiritually, or otherwise, when we reach out to somebody else and they become an integral part of that process of our healing, this is a very natural course of things. And I'll tell you why I think this is, because if we are connected, essentially you are just another aspect of me and I am an aspect of you. And there's this sense of totality wherein, what we are, this energy wants to be at an equilibrium. So for somebody to reach out and then become an instrument in somebody else's healing may be exactly what is needed at that time. Now, you talk about consensus between the people, you talk about expectation. There are a lot of different variables that can come in the way of either that succession, or maybe there's something in the way of a different result that wasn't foreseen. But at the very end of the day, I think that connection between us to help and help heal each other is something very intrinsic. And I think that we all have the ability to do that. So the work that you do is absolutely imperative to what we're working with now going forward as that collective species. Now, let me ask you this too. Again, some of these questions, the answers you give may just be in the realm of conjecture, which is totally fine. That's what we do here, of course. Where does science catch up with some of the esoteric principles that we explore? Is there a quantification for some of these concepts, perhaps tucked within inner circles throughout the field of academia or otherwise, or are we sort of on our own to do our best to describe the intangible?
I think we're on our own, to be honest with you. Right now, I don't think there is a lot of doctors, academia that want to look at this. They want to have that scientific method where they can replicate things. And this isn't really something you replicate, because every case is different. You're going in and doing things at a different level, at an energy level, and it's hard to quantify it. It's hard to replicate it and do it over and over. So if you can't do the scientific method with it, many times it's not there's not an interest. So I do have some people in the medical field that have an interest in this and that ask me to do things to help. But I would say for the most part, it's going to be a while before the science side starts looking at this and taking it seriously, because they can look at chemical reactions and know what's going to happen for the most part. But that's not always the case either with medicines. You look at all the side effects and the medicine that will help 8 out of 10 people. Why isn't it helping the other two?
Mm-hmm.
So we're just at this point. I would say that I'm on the outside looking in, and that was part of the reason that I called it shaman, is because it does work with spirit and energy like shaman do. But I also wanted to separate it, not pretend that I was some kind of a medical practitioner or anything like that, but also have it not look new, but show the new side of it, which is the slipstream side, and to let people know that we can do things fast, make a change fast, and that you don't have to be locked into years and years of work.
Well, we don't really have the time, most of us, at this point. And, again, looking at this collectively, we were forewarned that we would only have a short window to kind of work with some of these things. Now, what that means at the end of the day, whether this window closes or not, are we still going to be able to peer through it? I mean, I really don't know. I would figure there's another avenue there at some point. But, we look at this in a grand scale, and we can see that, again, there are opportunities when they arise, and perhaps we miss something. That's just the way it goes, and we follow that path. Now, do you consider yourself clairvoyant or sensitive in that respect?
There are some aspects that I do. I've had connections that you just can't explain. One example I'll tell you about is I was asked to help with a young man who had an organ transplant that was starting to go bad, and as I was helping this person, doing the process with them, another child came into the room that was very gray. And as I was working with the first one, helping build their energy, giving them energy, filling them full of love, looking for any obstacles to their recovery, this other one was very interested. And I started working with this other young child that came into my quantum room as well.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was working with this child, filling him full of love and energy, I could see him fill up, and then that energy flowed out to his family. So he had started off being there to help his family feel better. He came to see me to help him help his family to heal. He had donated to this other child. And while I was doing this, I thought I would like to know who it is I'm working with. And I don't know names when people ask me to do this kind of work, and I don't want to know anything about them other than the connection they have with the person I'm working through, because it tends to make me try to force the issue instead of just letting it happen. And so, but I did feel like I would like to know this child that came to me, the donor child, and I asked the name. And I'm not going to say the letter that this child said. I'm going to say something different to keep the person anonymous. I'm just going to say that I kept getting the letter C. What's your name? C. And I'm thinking Charlie. I'm going through, all the C names I can think of, and nothing's coming up right. And the child just kept telling me C. And so I thought, okay, I'm forcing this, something I'm forcing. But anyway, so I'm working with this child and help him feel better. I can see the love he's sending out to his family, helping them heal. I can see the bond that these two kids are having because of the donation. Beautiful bond, energy going back and forth between the two of them. Both of them are getting their color back. Both of them are getting stronger. The next day, the child that was alive that got the donation was up and moving and healing. I don't know what happened with the other family, but when I was talking to the person that asked me to do this, I said I kept getting the child kept telling me C, and I couldn't figure out what the C name was. I asked the name, and they kept telling me C, and this person said, well, they call him CC, and and so yes, there's some things like that. There's some clairvoyance, and your name, I can tell you anytime I get a name, if they tell me Michael, without question, when I talk to the person later, it's Michelle. And if they tell me Michelle, it's Michael. For some reason, it gets twisted in my head and I get the wrong thing, much like I used to spell it wrong in school. So, so I've messed up your name a few times in this. So yeah, there's some clairvoyance. There's some things that we see. The work I do is very similar to associative remote viewing. And so we are going places. And when I say we, it's because I have a team that I work with, dogs that have passed, and maybe we can talk about that too. But it's not just me doing this work. It might be different aspects of me, like you and I were talking a minute ago. Maybe you and I are just aspects of one big thing, and I think we are. So in reality, we're the same thing. But these things that come and help me really have a function, and I'm hoping it's them. I hope it's their spirits that are coming to help and be a part of this, and not just some aspect of me trying to use them to do things.
And I think at the very end here, once again, the result of healing, whatever that truly encompasses, however we get there, might mean less than actually getting to that point. The intention is the spearhead in most cases. And yes, I think there are many peripheral energies that come into our space, into our reality, to help us on different levels. And you talk about spirit guides, you talk about animal guides, all of these do play a part. And it's not necessarily that every person is going to be aware of this type of help throughout their life. And that may be entirely intentional. Again, unbeknownst to that person. It's the way you set things up, given what you want to experience. It's not necessarily, and in my opinion, something that you're learning, okay? Because if spirit knows everything the way that we've understood, all knowledge is accessible to spirit. What you're doing is coming here into the physical world to experience what you already know, because knowing is only one side of things, So, going down that avenue a little bit, you start getting other questions, but then again, start seeing the comprehensive nature of what we're doing here together, and how helping each other is really something that we need to improve, rather than the separation that we continue to subscribe to. With that being said, have you ever offered your services to patients of a hospital or some other clinical setting? We see a lot of Reiki people do this kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and the nice part about what I do is I don't have to be near these people physically.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with people in England. I've worked with people in all over the United States. I mean, it would work all over the world. And I think if somebody was on another planet, I could still work with them. I don't think space means anything in this area that I do work. But yes, I'm always open. When I hear that somebody has been injured or hurt, I offer. And all but 2 people have accepted. But I've helped numerous people that were in the hospital. I can tell you about one lady was very, very sick, having these just horrible nightmares in intensive care. And the nightmares were so terrifying that she didn't want to sleep. She didn't want to close her eyes because these things were so terrifying. It was like mechanical monsters were taking over her because of all the machines she was hooked to. And I asked, do you like these nightmares? Do you want these nightmares? She said no. So that was as close to permission as I got with that one. But I went outside, sat in my car, and started doing this work. And when I pictured this person, I could see this large, just dark, swirling cloud of chaos over her head, and started working with that, picking it apart, slowing it down, seeing the elements of it, and then working with each part of that nightmare that was happening, and then let it go, gave those things the love that they needed to break away and be what they were supposed to be. And those nightmares stopped that day. Within virtually the time I was doing that, they stopped and did not come back. Other people with hearts seemed to be a really good thing for this process with me anyway, helping people that have had heart trouble. But there was a dog puppy that I saw online that the owner was going to take and put down because they had something wrong with the liver. The veterinarian put some kind of a device in the liver to help things start flowing, and it wasn't working, and the puppy was dying, and it was painful, and he was going to go put the dog down. I said, hey, can give me an hour. Let me see what we can do. And the puppy turned around. They didn't put the puppy down. It's no longer a puppy. It's an adult dog. That's been 5 years. The dog's alive. Now, was it about to start working, the liver about to start working on its own? I don't know. But it's, again, those coincidences. I worked specifically on that. We made change. You saw the energy change, and the dog healed immediately. The nightmares went away immediately. The hearts start to improve immediately. And I wish I could show you the scientific method of how it works, but there is improvement every single time.
Now, what you're saying is somewhat revolutionary, at least in respect to our current experiences, and yet we are finding more consistency in, again, what you're describing rather than anomalies. I was speaking with Rich Giordano today from GoofOn, and we both agreed that perhaps this world is much more paranormal than it is normal. We've also heard Stephen Greer say this in many different ways. I mean, there are other people, that sort of hold the same perception. So I think once we're breaking through some of our inherent programming, whether it's subscribed consciously, or it's just part of the paradigm that we grew up in, whatever the levels that we went through with different people we've known, there's definitely within all of our paths this aspect of, we have a larger purpose here that's usually beyond ourselves, but we need to strip ourselves from certain things that happen in life to create this clear channel that becomes us in order to do this type of work. And some people never get there. Not to focus on that, but that's certainly a reality. And maybe they get a chance to do it again. But I mean, personally, I want to do it right the first time. That's for sure. Now, I want to continue going on with the shamanistic things as well, but I do have a couple questions that deal with cryptids and paranormal. It sort of kind of interweaves in here.
Sure.
Now, the Nunnehi, which, again, GoofOn had covered last night, the Nunnehi, a purportedly elusive forest people that befriended the Cherokee, seem to have elements of what we might consider traversing different overtones within our dimension, wherein they could appear and disappear at will, much like Bigfoot and some of the other cryptids of interest. Do you believe there's any connection in this type of behavior? I mean, the Pukwudgies that we see here on the eastern seaboard have been expressed to exhibit the same abilities. Do you think there's any connection between these particular groups of entities, I'll say? Because I don't know if they're species or not. We don't have any taxonomy or anything like that to kind of go by when we talk about Bigfoot, cryptids, or elementals at this level. What do you think, my friend?
I believe that they are connected somehow, and like you said, I don't know if they're species wise or not, but there is a connection. They're in my opinion things that can move through dimensions that we can't see or understand. As you're looking at footprints that travel in the snow and then just stop. They didn't fly away probably, but the print stopped. Where did they go? How did this animal get away? Why don't we ever find one? And there's just been too many stories, too many accounts, too much lore of all these things, and it's virtually the entire world has these cryptids, something similar to Bigfoot. I just can't imagine them not existing, that it's just some part of our big group thought process. There's something out there, and yes, I do believe that they interact. In my show, I've talked to many people that have been abducted, and they've seen different things like that on the ships, Bigfoot, other creatures that they didn't know what they were. And so I think there's a lot of connection that way with, is Bigfoot flying the ship? I don't know, but there seems to be a connection. You see more sightings of Bigfoot around, big sightings of UFOs. They tend to cluster. So I think there is a commonality there, and there is a tie-in between those things.
In your opinion, where they are going, okay, once they're out of our sight, out of physicality, keeping in mind that we only see a very small spectrum when it comes to the light, where are these beings sitting? Is it still an aspect of physicality, one that's just not readily accessible to us with the tools or the knowledge that we have? Or are they kind of dipping into an overtone that could be considered part of the spiritual world, wherein somebody passes on, they're either floating through these particular planes and they may, see the existence of a Bigfoot family or something along those lines. Are they on the other side? Again, in your opinion, where do you think these particular beings, what path do they traverse? What planes are they going through?
I would say that I like to use science fiction to help me describe things many times. For those nerds in the group like me that love Star Trek, I would say that they're doing things similar to when you would see them out of phase, where they're almost there, but they're not. They're moving at a faster speed or a slower speed, so we can't see them. There's an interaction, but not to where we can comprehend it with our minds. Probably at an energy level we can comprehend it, but I think they're just slightly out of our reality to where we can't see them. A story I can tell you is when I was in a process to get my spirit guides, my animal guides, I was walking around a fire with a group of people out in the West Desert of Utah, and as my walking changed, my gait changed. I started doing this lumbering walk, and as the spirit was coming to me, and I realized it was Bigfoot that was coming to me as a spirit guide. And in that moment, when I realized it, I looked along this ridge of mountains, and I knew without fail I could walk across those mountains in seconds if I wanted to, just like they do. Like travel 20 miles in a blink of an eye. And it was such a strong feeling with that I think they're just outside of what we understand. And I don't know if you call that a different dimension or just a different reality right next to our reality, or how to describe that. But I think there's times that I've been places that I thought I was with Bigfoot and couldn't see any sign of them, no smell, no sight, no nothing, but I just knew they were close. And I'm wondering if they were right next to me, just in that slightly different reality.
There are many times that we see people going out into the field, and I'll use Dr. Stephen Greer again as an example with his CE5 practice. They're using specific equipment to detect the presence of an energy or an extraterrestrial that's right in close proximity, or perhaps even using something more external to reach off some, feet or miles away into the sky to communicate with these things. So there is the possibility that, there's a cloaking mechanism that they're using, or I liked your language, saying out of phase. I mean, usually when you see something out of phase, it ceases to exist. But because we have many different multi-layers to these frequencies that may or may not make up our world, you'd have to be very specific with that band. And maybe you're turning only half of those frequencies inverted so that it's going out of phase, and you're, again, disappearing from perhaps just your visual sense, or, there's nothing tactile about your physicality at that time. Something that we may grow into as time goes on, because there have been extraterrestrial species, again, purportedly telling us this was their evolution. It's natural to follow this course. And yes, we are on our way that way too. Maybe not in our lifetime, Todd, but certainly we are here planting the seeds for that type of inquiry moving forward. Now, it's curious that you mentioned abductions, because usually when I think of abductions, I think of extraterrestrials. I think a lot of us do, or military, for example. But I have a very good friend who claims that he and another man were abducted by Bigfoot, believing that Bigfoot had relocated the two of them because they walked into some sort of wrong space. Maybe there was a ritual that they were undertaking, or they were doing something heavy in respect to energy. And they found themselves walking on the opposite side of the river that they were originally walking on, and going the opposite direction. Now, through this time, the way he describes it is that one moment he was in the woods, it was getting dark. The next moment he opened his eyes and he looked around, and he was in this world that really resembled what he would call an avatarish sort of world. So, I mean, these really tall trees that seem to be tropical, a very large canopy. I mean, the colors that he was trying to describe, he just couldn't put into words. It seemed like they illuminated from the inside out rather than reflecting on. We've heard this again in near-death experiences with other people and out-of-body experiences. They report the same thing. Have you heard or come across any other reports of folks being abducted by this particular cryptid or any others for that reason? And before you answer, I'm just going to tell you that his experience ended in a very benevolent sense. Again, it seemed as if they were just relocating him there for a moment. When they brought him back, he does remember, 3 of them being in front of him, crossing their arms in some sort of way, maybe doing a nod together in unison, and poof, he was off back to where he was in his physicality. Have you come across anything that visceral in people's experiences?
Not exactly like you're talking about, and I think that's wonderful where they just moved him out of a dangerous place. And I can maybe talk about something that happened to me to get me out of a dangerous place like that. But sure. I have talked to people that when they've had abductions, they will be led through places by things that look like Bigfoot or other monsters, for lack of a better term, aliens, monsters, whatever you like. So they do seem to be a guide at times. I don't believe that Bigfoot is just a wild branch of ape that if you run into it, it's going to rip you apart and eat you, or excuse me, anything like that. I think they're very smart. They want to know more about us too, and they're visiting. And I'm not sure exactly what they're looking for here, but I don't think they're just an animal walking through the woods. I think there's much more to them than that. I used to we talked about my radio show, and for years I would talk about, I can't wait until it's my turn to be abducted. I want them to come abduct me. And as soon as I'm on the ship, I'm going to commandeer it, and I'm going wherever I want. Right. And so I was just really a smart aleck with people. And they were saying you could almost feel the blood leaving the guests as I was making fun of this. They're like, Todd, no, this is not the way to act. This is, you're not going to do that. It doesn't work that way. Stop it. And so I made these jokes for a long time. And then one night I'm staying in this motel, and I love those little motels on the side of the road that are shaped like an L. They're all like 70 years old now, but it used to be along Route 66, and there's nothing much to them, but I just love them. And I'm in one of those, and I looked out the back window, and I saw that the field behind me was just kind of a mess of things, and broken vehicles and junked appliances, garbage everywhere. And I go to sleep. I'm awakened in the middle of the night. That whole back wall is gone, and there's beings coming into the room. There's one that looked similar to Sasquatch, not exactly. There was short grays, tall grays. There was an insect looking thing, and they all got around me, and in no uncertain terms made it clear that I was to stop making fun of commandeering one of their ships, that it wasn't going to happen, that I had no way to do it, and that it stopped now. And honestly, I didn't talk about it for about 2 years after that. I'm just now starting to talk about it to let people know that these things happen. I no longer pretend I'm going to commandeer the ship. I'm not saying that at all.
They don't like interlopers.
No, they do not. They made it clear. And I was physically ill for about 3 days after that interaction.
Wow.
I don't think it was like a radiation reaction. I think what happened was they were in a different space than I am. And when those two spaces got together, it made me sick. And as you're describing what happened, where those people were moved to another place, they saw the avatar stuff, I was kind of having a deja vu moment, thinking back to that happening. And so I think it was fairly similar to what happened with them, other than I wasn't moved to a different place, other than a different place in my thoughts.
I wonder too, as we go forward, that if we're going to hear more about these more intimate interactions with these cryptids. I mean, if they are a part of our world, the way that people talk, the Native Americans especially have, certainly expressed that they've had knowledge of these particular beings for quite some time, and they're very real in their culture. As we sort of integrate and reconnect with nature, we may get closer. It may be one of those situations, as extraterrestrials have again been purported to say, we don't want to have an interaction with you as closely as you would like until you're ready to sort of join us on a more peaceful level. You guys have a lot to learn. The way that a parent looks at a child, you need to grow up. So maybe there's that aspect of cryptozoology that's right there in front of us, and yet we're still kind of clawing and pining to try to get these answers the way, again, a child does when they're trying to understand something that's beyond their comprehension within the set of what they already understand, and what they're familiar with within the world. Very quickly, William Carr asked this question. He says, do you think that the crystals in the earth help us see the spiritual world? I think it's a very general question, just to kind of piggyback what he's saying. I think what he's asking is, do you believe that crystals and semi-precious stones that again have their own vibration help us to reach different states of vibration to see and experience spirituality in a physical way? Thank you, Will.
Absolutely. And for me, I love crystals. I love being around crystals. You can feel a change when you're around the crystals, but I'm that goofy guy that likes rocks. You see memes where a guy will have 400 little pockets on his jacket for each rock he's going to find on his walk. That's me. I collect rocks all the time, and I use the small ones to make rattles that help me focus, that are for specific things, or to give people so that they can focus. And so you've got that combination of wood and rock, and there's crystal in it as well. And yes, I think the in crystals is something we really need to look at more. I'm very confident that they do have a healing effect, a connecting effect for us. And I think he's dead on that yeah, there's something there with the crystals, finding the ones that work for you. And again, being a Star Trek fan and a sci-fi fan, I had the opportunity to go to the Vasquez Rocks a few years ago. And everybody that's watched sci-fi knows that those crooked rocks that they get on for different planets, what they are, and special energy with me there, and I collected a lot of those little tiny rocks that have gone into most of my rattles, and I make sure that any rattle I make for somebody has at least one pebble from the Vasquez rock, because the energy I felt there was unlike anything else I've ever felt.
That's so interesting. Again, intention is really everything. It's, you imbue something that you create with your hands, to say the very least, with a certain intention. And, you take in this peripheral energy and you utilize that, molding it the way that we mold clay. You come up with something very unique and definitely resonating with a specific individual. I couldn't agree with you more on that. Well, let's put it this way. We only have another 8-10 minutes left here, but I do have two more questions I want to ask you.
Sure.
They're a little comprehensive, but I'll do my best to simplify them. The first deals with negative attachments. Okay. When we talk about the world of the paranormal, this is often something that comes up. People get, daunted by the idea that they can catch an attachment, even just walking by a graveyard, which has, certainly happened before, the way people tell us. Is it possible that some of the negative entities that attach to us through certain situations may actually be factions of our darker selves that we had a contract to connect with in this lifetime? I mean, if we are indeed all of the same energy, all one, there must be some truth to this interpretation. What do you think?
It felt true when you asked me that question. It feels like a true answer. And as I'm thinking about it and looking at the healing work I do, I used to just try to destroy things like that were attached to people. Mm-hmm. What that evolved into is instead of just destroying them, once we get them off the person, get them ready to heal, get those things ready to heal that I was calling companions, then we fill them full of love so they can be what they really want to be. So I do think that as you say that it's a part of us, and in my way of thinking, it started out as something that was positive. that evolved into something that no longer helped us, and releasing that energy to be what it was meant to be is part of the work that we do as a Slipstream shaman.
Nice to go back in a callback sense, to what we first, brought this interview in with, talking about that to some degree, and then sort of revisiting it in this question. Again, I think that there are a lot of circles that we can find within this, things that root back to each other and, again, connect. Because, again, we look for consistencies, not only in a scientific definition, but we're finding that in a metaphysical field as well. And, of course, because they are parallel, the consistencies, right? They are something that cannot be ignored. We must acknowledge them and put some intelligence behind what we're seeing in respect to that pattern. Now, in regard to retrocausality, okay, and I'll very quickly for the crew out there just describe what this is. Essentially, it's looking back in time, all right, looking in your past to change something that's happened back then. Now, the reason I'm so interested in this is because when I was a teenager and I was working with Thoughts Manifest, the law of attraction, and just sending energy, people would tell me you can send energy to your next day, to see what happens when you do that. So I started playing with it, and sure enough, I'll be damned, it actually did work. I felt much different, and my days were much smoother, going to school and all this, you name it, everything was much better when I took that time to focus the night before and send all that energy and visualize how it would go. Now, I got curious one day. I said, well, what happens if I try visualizing something different, than what had happened in the past? And sure enough, it's been a struggle for me to explain this going forward to people because it's only happened a handful of times. But in sending that energy back to that specific point, maybe the people that were involved sort of seemed to forget, and maybe they were acting on something, or you weren't friends with somebody because of something that happened. Next thing you know, they come out of the woodwork, and it's like you meet them up again, and it's like it didn't happen, or something becomes attenuated in respect to your remembrance of how devastating that was. So maybe it wasn't as impactful. You think, oh, I thinking about this memory used to bring me to tears, and it would cause me a lot of pain, and now I'm thinking about it, it's like, oh well, okay, that happened, I grew from it and so forth. So in regards again to retrocausality, can you explain a little bit about the theories behind the mechanics of this phenomenon? Now, this is a very difficult concept for most people to wrap their heads around, simply because we see the future as something subject to change, and yet in our linear perception the past is already complete, as if we had made a stroke with a paintbrush on the canvas, having a certain color thickness based on our decisions that we've made. How does one change what has already happened? And is it necessary to jump into another timeline to do so? How do we do it intentionally?
So when you're working in the spirit realm, in the what I call the quantum realm, where shamans would work, time is different. It is completely different. When I do this work, I have a limited time to make notes about what happened for an individual, so I could tell them, what I witnessed, what I saw, how we fixed it, what we did, and I write it down. When I wrote my book, Slipstream Shaman, my editor was pulling her hair out reading the description of those things, because I used all three tense in the same sentence, and in my mind I used the word correctly, but she's going crazy because nothing's making sense as she's reading it. And that's because the time is so different there. And it's hard to describe what time is like, but it has no meaning. When I'm in that quantum room of mine, it sometimes feels like I'm there for 5 minutes, and I've actually in this life been there an hour. And the opposite, it feels like I've been in that room an hour and it's only been 5 minutes in this life. So time is completely different when you're working in the spiritual realm. And the retrocausality is one of the really cool things about that, is that's something that has been quantified by science. There was a group that went to a hospital, and they were able to get access to records of some people that had a blood disease. And they separated the records into two piles. One pile they prayed over and gave positive energy to. The other pile they did nothing with. The pile that they prayed over and gave energy to recovered faster, recovered at a better rate. The numbers were better for that group. And that was stuff that happened 10 years in the past. And so that was what got me thinking about the whole thing of retrocausality. I was driving one day and heard that on the radio. I had to pull over because it blew my head up. And but yeah, we do a lot of timeline work. The second book is going to have a process that I call trauma release, and it's looking at things that have happened in the past, letting it go so you can heal,
Hmm.
changing your perception. And how many times have you talked to two brothers that were in the same situation 10 years ago? One, it was the most traumatic thing that ever happened. One was, that wasn't that big a deal. They had a completely different view of what happened, though they were standing side by side and the exact same thing happened to them.
Divorce is a great example of this. Yes.
Yeah. And so healing those traumas of the past is what the next book is about, and traveling back and taking care of those so that you can heal now and stay healed.
Well, I have to tell you, Todd, I am absolutely fascinated by everything that you've imparted to us tonight. I think that, you have a very articulate way of explaining some of these things. Obviously, we don't necessarily have concrete words for what we're trying to explain. A lot of times we have to use what we have. And in the end, they end up either being something peripheral in respect to terminology, or it's flat out something we create. Because again, we're trying to describe something that doesn't sit within our reality right now. It's not something common, but I think that you do a fantastic job bringing some of these elements to the surface so that people can comprehend them on a more relatable level, is what I'll say. And again, that's a gift in and of itself. Yeah, absolutely, my friend. It's more than my pleasure to tell you that too. And it's not the case with everybody that you speak to. I mean, some folks are so out there in the understanding of the etherical field that they have a lot of trouble grounding themselves to bring them an anchor, what they're trying to convey to people in a very tangible sense once again, and sometimes fall on their face doing that. It's tough. It's a learning process for everybody involved. But again, I really enjoyed what you brought to the table tonight, and I certainly look forward to reading your book and of course following up with those follow-up books, the two others that are coming out sooner than later. Of course, maybe is this a trilogy? Would you look at it as a trilogy, one big comprehensive work? Or
I think it's going to be more than a trilogy. I think there'll be, there could be 5 or 6 before it's all done. I do love a trilogy, but I think it's going to go beyond that. But I would like to encourage people to go to my website, slipstreamshaman.com. I'm new to Instagram. I have virtually no friends. So, if anybody that wants to have me as a friend, please go to Instagram. I don't know how to use it very well, but anybody that comes in, I'll accept. I would love to have some practice. So but yeah, it's been great. And one thing I wanted to tell you too, Michael, you were talking about saying things so people would understand. The book is designed for you to read in about 2 hours. It's not something that's going to take you weeks to get through. I want you to get the book, spend a couple hours reading it, and start doing the work. Start building your energy, understanding, feeling your energy, creating your quantum room, and start healing yourself and others. And it's literally something. If you don't read the backstories that I've got in there, about half the book is just describing adventures that I've had doing this. If you don't read that part, you could actually be working on your own energy and your quantum room within a half hour of having the book, and start doing some of the things that I talk about. So it's fast. I don't want you to spend 2 days reading something and setting it down and never into it again. I want you to be able to use it, and that's how it's designed.
What a fantastic approach. We need something practical and applicable that we can interweave within our everyday. If the way you're suggesting this book reads, I mean, that's perfect for a lot of people. And yes, we'll make the time as we open up more to these concepts and more to the practice, how we see it, reverberate back to us in a certain respect, how we reflect that reality, and that reality becomes our reality, and so forth. Again, there's always a process to it, but I really appreciate that approach by and large. Now, I know we can find you on Instagram at Slipstream Shaman. We can also find you on Twitter at Slipstream Todd W. Okay. Is there anywhere else other than the website that I have all this listed in the description below, folks? Go and check it out. As you're hearing us verbally talk about it. Anywhere else that we can contact you, or if anybody would like to speak to you personally, is there a way to reach out to you? Sure. Let us know about that if you've got anything under your sleeves.
Yeah, on the website there's a link to an email, and that email is just slipstreamshaman@gmail.com. So I tried to keep everything the same. I was one letter too big for Twitter, and that's why it's Slipstream Todd instead of Slipstream Shaman.
Of course.
And so we went that way. But everything else is Slipstream Shaman to make it easy. And if somebody wants to reach out, and it happens almost every one of these interviews, somebody reaches out. I just worked with a lady and her dog yesterday from another interview that I did, and just Slipstreamshaman at Gmail, and I'll get with you just as fast as possible.
Awesome. Absolutely awesome. Thank you so much, Todd, for joining us tonight. I'm going to take you off for just a moment. If you have to go, I understand. If you can hang around for just a moment, I'll say my proper goodbyes off camera. Either way, it's been an absolute delight having you with us this evening.
Thank you very much. I'll wait. Yes.
No, the thanks is all mine, Todd. Believe me. Now, God, I know that the show is so short, and that may be something that we change in the near future. I want to make sure that everything stays natural. I use that word a lot, but there's a lot of meaning behind that for me. There's an attenuation of attention that happens at certain points, but God, we get into these conversations, and it just propels us forward with such a momentum. I don't want to stop. We talked quite a bit with Todd tonight about certain things, but there are deeper aspects of this that we can go into that perhaps lend to the general concepts that we are bringing up, and perhaps Todd will join us again in the future to dive into those deeper aspects as we go forward. Thank you all for being here with us tonight. This has been an absolutely awesome show. I've had a great time, as I always do. We're heading off to Montauk in the middle of August, as I've mentioned. We are forming up this documentary. It's coming out to be something much different than what I anticipated initially. But it's okay. It's going to be fantastic regardless. But I will tell you, it's going to be different than the Montauk Enigma documentary. Going to be much different. So definitely keep your eyes open for that. When I'm down in Montauk with Montauk is Strange and Long Island Bigfoot, I will be doing a live here and there, and we'll update everybody, and we'll talk about Camp Hero and some of the other places that we'll go right there on the tip of Long Island. I mean, there's just, the whole place is absolutely magical, as we've covered in many conversations extensively, especially with Brian Minnick. But I'm looking forward to this, and I cannot wait to get out there and start doing the work. In the meantime, we're going to continue on with the interviews. It is hot as hell this week out here in the Northeast. We're dealing with the very first day of a heat wave that should last through the weekend that we have here up in the upper 90s. Now, for you guys out in the Midwest and further, saying that's nothing. You guys have dry heat. It's not like the moisture saturated air here in the Northeast where you can't breathe either. So keep that in mind when I'm complaining about this shit. You know what I mean? Listen, again, thank you so much for joining us tonight, my super chatters. I appreciate your donations. Every little bit helps. It allows us to go out and do some of this peripheral work in respect to the documentaries. Obviously, I have many people that do work with me behind the scenes in regards to the interviews, and I appreciate the hell out of you folks. Michelle Freed, number one, thank you so much for setting up such fantastic guests with us here on Dark Hour. And my moderators, you guys do a fantastic job. Thank you for being with me and sticking with me all this time. We're 2 years in, and we were over 2 years in, but we've only just begun. And I've been saying that for a while, but my God, we keep delivering, and we will continue to do so. So until next time, folks, which will undoubtedly be next week. Maybe I'll do 2 next week. Depends. We're getting back on the UFO third phase report. So all of you who are interested in that topic of ufology and looking at sightings and, perhaps seeing some of the documentary work, I've slapped on the back of these videos, go over to Third Phase UFO Report. Check out our videos, get those view counts up. Let us know you're interested, because Rich and I have a lot planned for that channel moving forward. We took a little break for some time. Myself, I needed to focus on other things with Dark Hour and Third Phase of Moon and Dr. J Radio Live. And now I'm in a position where I can move forward with the Third Phase UFO Report. And again, Rich will be, or at least he's indicated that that's what he's going to be doing as well. So definitely keep your eyes out for that, folks. It's exciting stuff. Everybody has a different opinion. So hop in and let us know what yours is. All right. Until next time, stay explorative, stay curious, and continue to traverse this incredibly beautiful nebulous field that we're all in search of the truth together. Remember that word right there, together. In the very end here, there is no separation. There's only the illusion. Prove me wrong. Ciao.